Hello and welcome to Volleyball State, a proud part of the I-80 Club, and some would say the most popular part of the I-80 Club.
Wow.
Shots fired at the beginning. I'm Jeff Sheldon.
I'm Lincoln Arneal. That's a groin kick for the other partners.
Well, I mean, the numbers, the maths, right?
Yeah.
Numbers don't lie. This week on the show, we welcome Nebraska assistant coach Jaylen Reyes back to the show to talk an eventful spring at the Devaney Center and really all across the country because Jaylen is jet setting around, doing some recruiting and some player watching. He talks a preview of Nebraska's newcomers. There's 6 of them this year. We even go a little bit in depth into the process of Husker recruiting and now what that looks like with 2 of the country's best recruiters on the Husker staff. Plus, it's international volleyball season. It's been a quiet week for the senior U.S. women's national team, but the stars of tomorrow in the red, white, and blue brought home some Continental hardware of the golden variety last week. We'll talk a little bit about that. But hey, first, all season long, because I'm technically counting this as the start of the volleyball season, all the way through the end of it in December, we are so excited to partner with our new friends at Alumni Hall, the ultimate Husker shopping destination. You can get all your Husker apparel here there. They got 2 locations, downtown Lincoln at 11th and P and down at South Point Pavilions at 27th and Pine Lake Road in Lincoln. Plus, you can shop anytime online at alumnihall.com. And we are going to bring you, the beautiful, intelligent Volleyball State listening base, a little bit of a benefit here. Listeners of the show are going to save 15% on all your Husker apparel, all your merchandise, everything at Alumni Hall. All you have to do is this. If you're shopping in person, go into the store and say, mention Volleyball State. You're going to save 15%. If you're shopping online at alumnihall.com, no matter where you are, use the promo code Volleyball State, all one word, no spaces. Use the promo code Volleyball State, and you're going to save 15% at Alumni Hall. We're so excited to be working with them this year and giving you some great deals on some great merchandise. Alumni Hall has all the top brands that you're looking for, like Adidas, Champion, Columbia, the fancy stuff from Peter Millar, if you like that Husker gear out on the links. Also, New Era, Yeti, Lincoln, they've got tumblers, they've got to-go cups, all the great Yeti gear, all that and more. You can take advantage of being a Volleyball State listener and save at Alumni Hall. Shop at those 2 locations or online at alumnihall.com and use the promo code Volleyball State to save 15%.
Volleyball season's coming up quick. You better get yourself some gear. I mean, the red-white scrimmage is going to be in just over a month. It's coming quick, so get that there. If you want gear up for the season as well, too, you want more Volleyball State content, we got the hookup for you. We got some special stuff going on for our Patreon subscribers, too. So if you're supporting the program by being a subscriber, we're going to send you bonus content. We got one coming up here soon, probably next week, with doing some volleyball lingo, some volleyball jargon, some club scene stuff. So it's exciting. We'll do a lot more bonus episodes to fall. Volleyball State newsletter. And you'll be able to do our volleyball late post-game show. So we got a lot of stuff coming up. So subscribe at patreon.com/I80 Club. Sign up there. Join the Volleyball State. Also listen to the other guys. We kid, but they're put out great content too. The Growing Kick Chronicles, what the Josh and Jack are putting out, is really. I just listened to the most recent episodes.
Super well done.
Yeah,
really high quality stuff.
So follow along there. You can follow along with social media, Volleyball Pod. We got Twitter, Blue Sky, TikTok. We got lots of stuff. You can follow Jeff and I social media. It's volleyball season. We're only ramping up from here.
One of the things that we do for our Volleyball State subscribers too at the I-80 Club is we will take questions in the I-80 Club Discord. Either we'll answer them on the show, or the one that we're setting up right now is our Volleyball 101 with a very prominent local club coach. We've already got like 4 or 5 questions that have come right from listeners at the I-80 Club Discord that we're gonna talk about with our coaching guest coming up we're gonna record it in a couple days. Not sure when exactly it's gonna come out. Lincoln and I are trying to bank some stuff for July to get you through the dog days of summer while we are both on vacation different weeks of July. Yeah. So trying to record some evergreen stuff. And that is kind of what today is too, because Jaylen Reyes is a wonderful guest. This is his 2nd time on the show. He was like one of our first guests in season 1, back when we were just recording over Zooms and I was staying up late to edit it.
Yeah.
It was really good back then. And Jaylen's always a great guest. He's super personable. And we talked about a number of things, as you're about to hear. We talk about, the transition with Dani Busboom Kelly coming in this spring, the assistant coaching transitions of being moved around to their position focuses. And then, of course, if you're going to talk with Jaylen, there's no one better out there to talk to you about Nebraska recruiting. So we talk a little bit about the newcomers that are going to be on the court this fall. Plus, looking ahead, the classes of 2027 and 2028 are committed. Can't go into specifics on names right now, or at least he can't. Lincoln and I can.
Just 2027. We haven't had 28 yet.
Okay. Sorry. I'm so
2027.
2027 is what we just got. I meant to say 2026 and 2027. Jaylen drops like a 2030 in there a little bit, and it just like blows our mind. So we'll just consider that the future. But it was so great to talk with Nebraska assistant Jaylen Reyes. Let's get to that right now.
We are joined once again by friend of the program, Nebraska assistant coach Jaylen Reyes. Jaylen, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
We say friend of the program like anyone who's ever been on the show before. We've been on long enough that we should start looking at enemies of the program. And I don't know how many of them there are, but there's got to be at least a couple out there.
That'd be a fun. I don't know if you throw that out to the fans and try to build a list there, maybe. I don't know.
There's a couple Twitter followers, I would say, that just come at Lincoln, especially, and me a little bit. A lot.
I would say there's probably some people that rather be on the enemy list of the program than friends.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's true. There's more of them, it seems like, and they stand out.
And it's also it also has to be the what's the saying, you keep your friends close but your enemies closer. So those are the people on the inside.
Yeah, we hug those. Sometimes I dip into the fan base to get Wisconsin people, get some Texas fans in my social media mentions. It's we'll take it though. We're all talking volleyball, so it's all good. So
I love it. The more people talking volleyball, the better.
Yes, Jaylen, we want to have you on. It's been kind of a different spring, early summer for you, so kind of just want to do a quick recap. It's been a couple and more interesting journey than it maybe has been the last couple of months. So how different has this spring been for you compared to years past?
Are you talking the entirety of the spring since January?
Well, yeah.
Well,
some stuff's happened.
We'll start with the boss change. Was kind of a big thing, but it's been great. I mean, Dani is Dani, and people that know her, how awesome she is and what she's done in her coaching career, not just at Louisville, but before that at Louisville as an assistant, at Tennessee, here at Nebraska, and then obviously doing what her and, Coach Meskey's done at Louisville kind of speaks for itself. And then, so, I mean, that was a turbulent time for sure, a very turbulent, 3 or 4 days with other stuff going on as well. In terms of, we had to make some recruiting decisions back then, if I remember. And then suddenly it's then the boss changes and, we're talking about deciding to go over to Italy to go watch a certain player that I think you guys know who I'm talking about now, and seeing how that's going to go. And obviously just the transition of, I'll be honest, when there's a head coaching change, you make it through the first portal window and nobody's decided to go in the portal, which was awesome. And then head coaching change comes, and now that I don't exactly know when that official date started, but 30 days starts from whenever John officially retires. So we made it through then. And for those that maybe aren't friends of the program, we do a beach volleyball season. So that's during our beach volleyball season. So we're Dani gets announced in, I don't know the exact date. It's toward the middle.
It was near the end of January, wasn't it?
Yeah. So she gets announced, but she's not officially here yet in terms of she goes back to Louisville. She's moving the family out. She's coming back and forth because obviously they're working on buying a house. So she's, here for 3 or 4 days during the week and then goes back home over the weekends. And I don't remember exactly the timelines of everything like that, but, we're working, me, Kelly, and Coach Brennan Hagar, who's now our third assistant. So that was another change that also happened this spring. There's so many changes that it's man, they just all kind of got pushed down the list with the Dani switch. And then we have a really, really awesome beach season. Win a lot of matches, got to travel to some pretty cool places. Went down to Stetson and Orlando. got some really, really competitive matches there. Played a bunch more actually outside this year in Lincoln, which was kind of cool to see it being 70 degrees here in February or March. And then awesome trip to Hawaii and California. By then, Coach Dani Busboom was with us for the Hawaii portion of the trip. And then I think one of the big things for us is just was when we started indoor, right? Typically, Coach Cook in the past hasn't been super involved with beach in terms of the day-to-day training and who plays with who and who plays with what slots and stuff like that. So that was kind of very similar, if I'm being upfront. But once we got into indoor, that's where a lot of the changes happened from, us assistants coach, some of us coaching different positions, to obviously having a new assistant coach, to just having a new lead voice in the gym, which is a big deal, just because obviously Coach Cook's resume and his pedigree in the gym kind of speaks for itself. And having Dani here it was a transition for sure for everybody. And transition doesn't always, I think transition is always, the word has a negative connotation, but it was just different. And starting with me, it was way different from, hey, what does John like versus Dani, and what position am I coaching, and what drills we're doing. And, even sometimes the duration of practices and the flow of practices were very different, as similar as they are, it was different. So, but no, I think spring was great. And we had a bunch of new players in the gym. We had a kind of a big freshman class join us this January. So kind of getting to work with all of them. On top of that, we've had, 3 or 4 players come and join us over the summer, 1 transfer, 1 foreigner from Italy. And then we had 2 freshman middle blockers coming in once we started, the summer school session here at the beginning of June. So just a lot of, we got some new faces around, and we got some new coaches coaching different things. And, on top of that, the transition of saying goodbye to a really, really awesome and successful senior class, with Lindsay, Merritt, Lexi, and Kennedy, and Layla Blackwell, having them guys transition out. So a lot of transition with a lot of new faces. I think that's kind of the big thing. And obviously, the head coaching change was the biggest.
Jaylen, that was a great way to set up this, because I think you touched on a little bit.
I think I covered everything, by the way.
We have absolutely
covered everything.
Thank you, Jaylen Reyes, for being with us on Volleyball State. You brought up a couple things I think we want to dig into a little bit, and you brought this up kind of a few minutes ago, that nobody left in the transfer portal, which is not, I would say, the norm when you have a coaching change in college volleyball. Were you worried when this announcement happened that anyone was going to leave, even though you were bringing in someone with that was known to the program, that was known to the fan base, who has a super high level of success? There's always, it's a change, and change can spook some folks, especially younger players.
If I was saying no, I'd be lying to you. If you ask me, am I surprised now that nobody, I would say, no, I'm not surprised. Because I think, and not just on the Nebraska side of things, look at the Louisville side and just how it was handled by both schools, and I think a big thing to talk about is, I'm a big, hey, show me person to a degree. And everyone talks about, and even in recruiting talks, hey, this school cares about volleyball, Trust me, it cares about volleyball. I don't know. I give a big kudos to the school, starting with Troy and President Gold, and just making this transition. It was a football level of transition in terms of coach letting everyone know he's retiring that day, to obviously, I think Coach Cook has talked about the backstory of when he decided and started having these conversations. Mm-hmm. And of course, they tied Dani in, and obviously I knew they tied Dan Miskey in, and obviously the Louisville administration had to be tied in as well. You don't really see that in our sport. Mm-hmm. You see it where a coach steps down and there's this grace period. And I think if, for friends and enemies of the program, you guys have probably seen this year, there's been other schools that have handled head coaching changes differently, and it hasn't been as seamless in terms of what the roster looks like, and that's not a fault of anybody's. It is what it is. And I felt like the fact that not just Nebraska, but the fact that Louisville also did the same thing, where, to my knowledge, they didn't have anybody leave at the time during that spring period. And the fact that, both schools were able to hire, who they wanted to be the next heads of the programs. As efficient as I think you possibly could.
Yeah, that was some high level espionage that
yeah,
you off there.
And the fact that I didn't get we didn't get any Lincoln Arneal tweets during this whole thing going down, it has to have been laser tight. And for the record, I had no idea until the morning of. So when the whole crew, when the whole world found out, I didn't find out until the morning of. So I think a lot of people think, oh, this has been put in motion for weeks and the staff knew. I can only speak for myself. I had no idea until the morning of.
Yeah.
We've talked about it on the show a little bit before that. I think Lincoln and I started to hear things maybe an hour before the announcement was made. So this was kept locked up pretty tight.
For sure. We're talking about Dani a little bit here. You've got a chance to work with her. She was around the team during beach, got to know them a little bit, but you got to work with her, and you had a little bit of relationship before with her. You knew who she was, got to work with her at USA Volleyball. And just recruiting world as well too. What have you learned more about Dani as you've gotten to work a lot more closer and more and work with her in the same program during the spring?
I think the biggest thing I've learned is my interactions with Dani before having this opportunity to work for her was all in recruiting gyms, at volleyball conferences, or like what you said at USA. She's like the same in those, like her personality is the same in those scenarios as it is with our team, and that's something that I always I wonder what it would be like to work with her, like day by day, like day to day in the gym, maybe when she has to handle some hard conversations. She's her personality doesn't change, which is really, really awesome in my opinion, just because, sometimes you don't, it's like a player not knowing what a coach really, how it is to play for them. Sure, they schmooze you in the recruit talk, but then once you're working with them in practice, you really see how people are. Dani is very, really, really similar, and pretty much the same compared to how, what I thought going in. A lot of it is the same.
Well, and we know that Dani's reputation is that she's one of the best recruiters in the sport. And that's certainly not an area where Nebraska has struggled in the last couple of years. You all have a great recruiting operation as well. But Jaylen, how have you had to kind of adapt your role in the recruiting process or adapt your style to fit what her vision is and what she does? And how do you make yourself complementary to that?
Gosh, that's an on-the-spot question. I feel I definitely have adapted to what she wants. One in general, just being, and I think it's not just her. I think it's just the rules. So the fact that with the roster limits, sure, we've never really had more than 18 players, but with the scholarship limit going up, we're able to have more than 12 girls on scholarship. So I think some people will see we'll be carrying, a few more players than we do normally. I don't know if we'll ever want to be at the full 18 ever. I don't think that's not been a goal her and I have talked about. But for example, this fall will be the first fall, if I remember correctly, that we'll have 4 middle blockers on the team. Mm-hmm. Typically in the past we've only had 3. Mm-hmm. I remember my first year we had 2 essentially, back in 2018. Callie Schwarzenbach was a freshman and Lauren was a redshirt sophomore. We had a transfer right before the season, and we kind of had to have a couple other people fill in to be that third middle blocker just in case something happened with those 2. So, I think that's kind of one thing is she typically has maybe a few more players. But I think in terms of what we're both looking for, styles, the June 15th calls, they were fairly similar to Coach Cook's. She's not a, hey, I'm going to have this massive presentation and we're going to show you all these different things, Sure, I think a lot of the kids that we talked to, obviously we got, without going into their names, we talked to, they were familiar with Nebraska already, so that helps. But I think it's just hey, sit down and get to know you. So that's kind of what we used to do in the past. So that really hasn't changed much in terms of, I would say one thing is, and I think if Coach Cook were to see this, he wouldn't disagree. Dani's a little more involved in like the day-to-day communicating with club coaches than maybe he was. So that was kind of nice. And then I think one thing that she's really pushed me to do is like delegate to Kelly and Brennan a little more, which is something I'm having to like learn, and I know I need to do more. So that's one thing that she's like actively pushed on me a little more. But in terms of like what we're looking for in players, I mean, she has her opinions, I have mine, which is I think normal. A lot of them obviously align. I think fun fact, and I've told this to people, is some of the younger players on the team. I always had this idea that like Dani would be the coach of Nebraska. I know I took a step in the dark here, but like I thought Dani would be the coach of Nebraska eventually. So, I mean, Campbell Flynn, I'll use her for an example. I used to ask Dani, a few years ago, what do you think of Campbell Flynn? And, she would just like, why? I'm like, well, you're going to probably be our head coach one day. So, so like I felt like we would always start to align, and the fact that John and her talked a lot, like she kind of knew when we come to tournaments who we were looking at, or, hey, when we offered somebody and it didn't happen or it did happen, she would ask me about it. So one, that means she already knew, so it was like, I also felt like if there was somebody she didn't want me to recruit, she would like hunt me down and talk to me about it a little bit, it was like, hey, I heard you were looking at this person, so I know it's a little different approach just because the fact that Louisville and us were competitors, obviously, with us both programs being to a few Final Fours in the last 4 or 5 years. So, but there was a lot of collaboration, amongst, and I think it's from John and Dani, obviously, and whenever she would talk to me about stuff and I would talk to her about stuff, we never felt like there was no, I felt like this normal like wall you try to put up maybe when you talk to other coaches. There was none of that with her. It was pretty transparent both ways, and with her staff. And I also felt like that's kind of made this seamless. But in terms of like, hey, how I've had to adjust, I think that for me, the delegating part is probably number one. And just the fact that like the boss is a little more, and don't get me wrong, John would always talk to club coaches when we needed to, but Dani is kind of more of I would ask John to do it and John would be like, sweet, sounds good. I would ask Dani to do it and she's usually like, oh, hey, I already chatted with such and such earlier this week, So I think one, you just, when you work here and you're kind of in the recruiting role, you kind of learn how to do stuff. You try to be ahead of stuff. So the fact that, she used to have my job probably maybe just gets her a little more thinking that way. And I know she thinks that way. She thinks about recruiting a lot. So that was really, really nice. And, makes the transition a little easier for sure.
For sure. The first recruit who committed when Dani was coach was Kenna Cogill came in. She was kind of, I don't know, was she on your radar before with John, or kind of once Matt Ulmer left Oregon? And I think that opened up a lot of players.
Yeah.
You mentioned not having four middle blockers, and she was that fourth one.
Right.
When did she come on the radar?
So Kenna came to Dream Team Camp when she was younger, when she was either a freshman or sophomore. I think it was after her freshman year. T. Sigler, they all came out here. In fact, there was a lot of they both played for the Arizona Storm Club. There was a lot of kids from Arizona Storm that year that came through. But
that's a great program to recruit.
They're okay.
Lawrence Severance played there too, and there's a lot of Kalia Lanier for volleyball fans out there. She played there. Willow Johnson, Randy Johnson's daughter played at Great Opposite played at Oregon. I mean, I can go through the list. We're going to play one of them.
We'll become very familiar with that program in the next
We're also going to play a really good player, Jordan. I believe her last name's Wilson now. She plays for Arizona. She played for Coach Terry Spann at the Arizona Storm club out in Phoenix. But yeah, I think so. She's come to camp. She was on our list. I guess I can talk about this now. That before like a few years ago, back when she was being recruited, we were still under that old model of you had 12 scholarships. There was no roster limit. Coach Cook typically liked a 14, 15 person roster, and we typically had 3 middles. And at the time, just with the middles on our team, we were kind of full in that class. That year. We weren't full in the class. We actually decided not to take anybody in that position in that recruiting class. So if you kind of double back, we didn't take anybody. And then now it's like funny because now things change and we actually have two of them, Manaya and Kenna. But, you know, some things changed on our team where other kids decided to make other decisions. And then I think the big thing for us was just the scholarship opportunities went up. So like, okay, and that's a position you typically want. You know, you can make an argument with the physicality that position, the pounding that position takes. You could have 4 or 5 on a team and people wouldn't look at you sideways, you know?
Yeah.
So that's kind of, I mean, Kenna was always on the list. It wasn't because she wasn't good enough. And it was just the timing and scholarships and the way it all fell with, you know, we've kind of allotted, hey, Becca, Andy, maybe some other people would be here at the time. We just didn't really have a need, and we decided, hey, we're going to pass to the next class, and then some people make decisions. But recruiting for volleyball sometimes happens years in advance. So sometimes decisions in between, when you have to make a decision on a recruit, their June 15th year, some decisions that happen in that 18-month period can affect it. So, you know, originally the class of 2025 current freshmen, we didn't envision bringing in any middles. And now we have 2 freshmen. So go figured. And that's how much things change in recruiting. So, and that happens with a lot of teams. It's not just here at Nebraska. A lot of staffs have someone decides to go in the portal. You know, someone gets hurt. Someone maybe develops a little bit quicker than they think. So they don't need. So, I mean, you hear a lot of conversation from coaches all over where, you know, you offer a kid 1 year and then things change with maybe current kids on your team or kids that are going to be scheduled to come in the next year. And, you know, things evolve quickly.
Coaching changes happen, and they were to different schools. That's
another one that obviously happened where coaching changes happen and kids make decisions, and you know that domino effect affects another thing, and then that person makes a decision. Suddenly, there's another opportunity. So it's a thing that obviously, you know, it never ends. So it's just one of those things that keeps constantly evolving, and you know, it's kind of my job, all of our jobs, but mainly my job to make sure we stay on top of it here for sure.
You know, I don't think that Lincoln and I have really talked enough about the change from 12 scholarships now to 18. I mean, that's a 50% increase in scholarships. Is it a bigger change in the program, Jaylen, to like on the recruiting side of it, or does that bring about more of a change like on the roster management side? Because now instead of like 12 scholarship players and maybe 4 or 5 walk-ons, you've got 18 scholarship players there. So that's a lot more, you know, I don't know, mouths to feed, so to speak. Like, what's the biggest change that brings about in the program, that change in scholarships?
Well, I mean, it can be good and bad, right? There's negative and positive consequences to everything, right? So the nice part is it's like to a degree, and I'll say this. Not every school is choosing to have 18 scholarships. So it's not like some teams might not even have 18 players on the team. Some schools might still say, hey, you only have 13 or 14. You know, we're not going to give you the full 18. So this is not like hey, everyone is going to be playing this game of 8. You have 18 scholarships. But, you know, to a degree, now I don't even feel like we're having the scholarship talk. You know, it's more, hey, how many spots we have on the team, and we can, you know, you can cover their financial aid because that's how many spots we have, you know? So I guess when I first got here, you know, you're trying to, with 12 scholarships, right? If you typically have 2 setters on scholarship, if you have 4 outsides and 2 opposites, you're already at 8. So if you have a libero or 2, you're already at 10. So then, okay, if you have 2 middles and 2 liberos, that's already your 12 scholarships. So you typically want another libero or DS. You might want a 3rd setter. You might want another pin position player to get to 7, or you want a 4th middle or 3rd or 4th middle. So you kind of had to get creative with how you did the scholarships, where maybe, hey, a libero who's a junior is on a full ride. The freshman has 2 for 4, what we used to call it, where her freshman and sophomore year, she wouldn't be on scholarship. And then when the junior would graduate, she would get a scholarship. Or you could, you know, your 3rd middle is not on scholarship her freshman year, and then she's starting the 2nd semester of her freshman year on. So you had to be a little more creative with that, with the 12 scholarships. Versus now, I I can only speak for us. I don't know what other schools are necessarily doing because you don't necessarily know what they have. But now it's almost like, okay, how many roster spots do we have, if that makes sense? So, and some schools are not choosing to give the full amount or the allotment of scholarships, or they're deciding how to divvy up. Where's that funding come from? But yeah, it's a lot. There's less having to, okay, how do we finagle? We have 2 scholarships for 3 players. How do we make this work? That's what we used to kind of have to do, especially for, the third DS, third middle, fourth middle, backup opposite, backup center. That's kind of those are the kind of the positions that you kind of had to, recruit. And then, for your walk-ons, it's like, hey, we got to find some great walk-ons. Obviously, we can find the fact that high school volleyball is really great around here. The fact that Nebraska volleyball is an attractive spot. There's a lot of kids that would decide to, hey, we'd love to come on and walk on at Nebraska volleyball. But it was a different recruiting talk that we had to give, and stuff like that. So I feel like that's just like looking at it now. It's like even when I write hey, our team, what does it look like in this year of 2029? You used to label like 1 if they're on scholarship, 2, so you have, you can only have 12. Now it's like you're just writing 1 through 18 and just making sure you fit in the position. So I hate to dumb it down that way, but that's definitely one thing that's the big difference, I would say. And then, I think it allows more depth. I would say this too. This is all going to be new. So yeah. I think a lot of the changes that are going to start this fall, some of them are going to start on July 1st. This is all new. So I don't want to pretend like we have everything 100% figured out, because I don't feel like we ever do here. But there's a little bit of like, hey, trial and error, we're going to see. But I think just in general, it allows you to get a lot, like, some programs are going to be able to really stack some talent, because the fact that, hey, some of these volleyball programs that maybe are closer to the top, a lot of kids want to go to, but before they couldn't necessarily go there because they couldn't maybe afford to go there if they were a kid 13, 14, 15, 16, right? Now those kids can get school paid for, as long as they're within 18. And again, depending on how many scholarships or how much financial aid the school is going to give. So now, as of right now, it looks like, hey, some of the bigger schools, it's easier to stack some players, but we'll see. We'll see, how does this affect, and will it stay this way? Will it evolve? That's like, we can do a Zoom in 2 years from now, 3 years from now, and I might be able to give you a better answer than now. But
that's fair.
We'll see. But I feel like it's the fact that the fact that we have 3 right sides, we have 4 left sides on the roster, we have 4 liberos and 4 middles is crazy, because it's just so different. Because before, we just, not that we wouldn't even try to do it, it's really hard because you couldn't pay for everyone's school,
Yeah. I mean, the other new thing you have to deal with now is revenue sharing too. Is that coming up in conversations at all, or is it still kind of the same conversations you were having before? Is that
in recruiting?
Yeah, in recruiting.
Compared to like when I first got here, yes. When it was like totally like taboo to even think about paying a player to come to a school, yes. It's definitely changed, but it's not. I can only speak for us. Dani's talk this June 15th, and now this is the first time I've seen this talk, versus John's talk even 3 or 4 years ago. It hasn't really changed. The one thing I think the company line we give is, hey, you'll be able to be as competitive. We'll be able to be as competitive as anybody when it comes to that specific thing. But we're not, hey, this is the number, this is your number, this is the number, this is the number, and then there's a negotiation that goes on. We haven't done that. Again, in a year or 2 from now, we'd be able to talk, and maybe my answer will change. But as of right now, it hasn't fully been that way. There has been some talks about that stuff, but it's not as prevalent as I would imagine in the other sports, especially the 2 bigger other sports, So, I don't know, and I can't speak what other schools are doing necessarily, because you hear stuff, but I don't know. I'm one that doesn't fully believe a lot of people when it comes to everything like that, just because, it's word of mouth, and sometimes people only tell you what they what they wanted to hear, but I can tell you from our side of things, it's affected it for sure, but it's not as like, hey, this is the first thing and the only thing we talked about with them.
Yeah.
Well, and it seems like from what you hear is that maybe that's not such a prevalent conversation with high school recruits who are going into their junior year of high school. Maybe it's more like that's the portal conversation that happens of players who have a number of options there.
Right. I would definitely say that too, for sure. And I think too, I would just project this as like, if I'm a volleyball coach, I'm not the Nebraska coach right now. I'm just like a volleyball coach, and but I have an understanding of how this works now. It's, you're looking at it and you're like, man, you're going to promise money to somebody that's not going to even be on your team for 2 seasons, versus the portal kid, they can be on your team next week, and play for you. So it's, yeah, I mean, even in pro sports, right? I don't think, like in pro sports, I guess maybe like the NBA is probably the only one where it's like, hey, a player signs a max extension and it doesn't kick in for 2 years, but you're technically still playing that player for the next season.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably, Jeff, if I be honest, like I think that's probably one of the main reasons why is us coaches, right? If you're talking about paying people, it's really hard to like, hey, we're going to give you an exact number right now, but hey, we're not going to talk about this, or we're not going to see each other. I mean, you're not going to be on our team for 18 months. That's a little, like, it's a little different, right? Versus usually men's basketball recruiting happens later, or obviously in the portal. Football recruiting, football recruiting happens whenever, and then they end up changing their decisions like 6 times anyway. So yeah. I don't know when it really starts.
Yeah, it's a little bit more of a gamble, or maybe of a risky investment that you're trying to commit to.
Right, and I can't speak for everybody, but I don't think I'm saying something that a lot of people don't know. There's definitely more money in those 2 sports, right? So there's just more going around. There's more influence from a lot of different people. Volleyball, I think we're getting there. We're not what those 2 crazy crazy avenues are compared to what we are, but yeah, I would say definitely more in the portal. The kids that are going to be plug and play kids for your team the following year, that's where I think more of those conversations, and even from what I've been hearing around college volleyball, it's more of the conversation with people that are going to be transferring to your team the next semester or for the following season than necessarily high school recruits that won't join your team for at minimum 18 months. So
yeah. Change gears a little bit. Jaylen, you and I had a chance to talk right after Virginia Adriano had committed to Nebraska. A little bit, speaking of unusual recruiting cycles, and that's a little bit coming from Italy too. She's now on campus. She's helped working out the camps. When you finally saw her in person, it's like, oh, this is real. This has finally happened. I mean, looking back, how are you surprised how it came together with all the different moving parts, with visas, with getting her here? Are you surprised when she finally was here? It's like the saga is over.
It was kind of like a whoa, like I saw you in Italy in January and you're here, kind of a thing. So, am I shocked she picked to come to school? No, because I always thought she really hammered home that her parents and her mom really wanted her to go to school. And it just wasn't an option to do it in Italy because she was playing at, in the A1 league. So it was just too hard for her to do it, especially if she was, those that don't know, Bergamo's not like this massive city. It's about an hour and a half drive away from Milan. So it's not this massive city where, a pro team necessarily isn't gonna, hey, yeah, come after school's done. It's not like that, right? They're going to practice in the morning, weights in the day. It's a job, right? So they treat it like such. So that was one thing. But yeah, I mean, in terms of all the hoops that we had to go through, right? So, hey, this is back when we were still figuring out how many scholarships would we have, right? So that was the conversation back then. And then yeah, hey, she's giving up a good amount, right? She could have gone and played at some other teams next fall. She would have been training with the Italian national team, which she gave up for this summer. And I think she'll do it in some later summers here, but she would have been doing that this summer, and because she needed to get to school right away. And then obviously just the eligibility piece and the NCAA clearinghouse stuff, that's where for us was the biggest even once she decided, it kind of was out of both of our hands. It was in the, it was in the NCAA, and would they clear her? Because she's a little older. So it was like, how many years would she be able to play if she was able to play? And, hypothetically, let's just say they only granted her a year or two. I don't know. Hypothetically, she might have decided, it's not worth it because, again, I wanted to go to school and get a degree. And realistically, most people can't graduate with an undergrad degree in a year or two. So, her goal is we're going to try to get her here in June, get her to start summer school so she can start getting school taken care of. And, I'm pretty sure this is for all universities in America on a student visa. There's like a certain percentage of your classes you have to take in person. So she couldn't just, she's waiting for her visa, start school in Italy and just take online stuff. Like she has to be in-person classes. A certain percent of her school has to be done that way. So a lot of that. And then it was like, okay, when could she get her visa? That got passed. And then after that, I've heard our current president changed the kind of some news about that. But thank gosh, it was like the week before she got her visa, and then that happened. So for us, I know some other volleyball programs around the country that are getting some foreigners this summer. They're all like kind of praying that their kids are able to get to school on time, because that's a real thing. But yeah, no, it was, and then just she's never been in the United States before. Like just the fact that like, is she gonna actually leave home and leave what she's like her norm and leave all her friends and her family back home and come, because that's a big deal, and especially I know she's a little older, but I think all of those things and the fact that it was a process that started in late November, early December, and okay, we met in January in person, and then we haven't seen her since, and obviously some random Zoom calls and phone calls since then, but just all these different steps, and and then there's her English is awesome, but you're talking to some people that are trying to help facilitate, and there's a language barrier for me that doesn't speak Italian, so just you got that. There's definitely more hoops recruiting a foreigner. It's just a different ball game, and but no, it was interesting. It was super educational. I feel like I'm a better off like college coach because of it, and know way more about Italy, know way more about how pro agents work. I think that's going to become a big deal here in a little bit. And, but yeah, I feel like I learned a lot, but it was definitely a lot of making sure we're coordinating time zones and where everyone is and what the Italian time zone is compared to Lincoln, and if someone else is somewhere else, making sure we're all on the same page there. So it was, I guess really, really long answer, but I would say yes. When I first saw her the first time, because I was actually out recruiting when she first got here, so I wasn't here when she was here. I saw her like in the gym wearing a Nebraska volleyball shirt, like helping out at a camp, or like just standing waiting to sign autographs, and it was like, whoa, like she's still really tall, awesome, and like it's crazy to see her here wearing a red Nebraska volleyball shirt. So it's been awesome, and it's an adjustment for her. There's a lot of different things that I know she's going through with school and some weightlifting stuff that they're doing off on their own, just because it's just everything's different, Different's not bad, but everything's different.
Well, I know Lincoln talked to Jaylen for his story that he failed to plug when he started this question, so I'll do it. Like, check out Lincoln's story about Virginia Adriano's recruitment on Huskers Illustrated. But Jaylen, I think the only exposure a lot of Nebraska fans have gotten to her so far is some couple minute long YouTube clips. Can you give us like the short 30-second version on what kind of player Nebraska has now with Virginia Adriano?
Yeah, she's a player. I would say this. I'm going to know way more when we start training, because I haven't really worked with her because of NCAA rules. But like in her gym in Italy, they set her. She's an opposite. She played 6 rotations because obviously that was the game overseas. You for those that know, you only get 6 subs. You can't sub people in and out like we could do in college volleyball. Mm-hmm. She's an attacker that. She typically gets a little bit higher of a set. She's not one that they set her super fast. In fact, Ashley Evans, if people remember that name, she set for Purdue. She played on the U.S. national team for a little bit. Mm-hmm. She was actually the setter when it was kind of funny. I went over there and I was like, wow, shocked to see another American there. But They set her a little bit higher of a ball over there compared to maybe the other opposite they had on that team. And she does a really nice job of like hitting the ball all over the court. She has a really nice arm. She's just big and long. She's really tall. She's probably 6'5", and she probably has about a 6'6", 6'7" wingspan, somewhere in there. She's really, really long. So she's that type of player. She's a big, really, really intelligent blocker just from watching her play overseas. Really intelligent blocker, and she has this. I think the big thing that people will notice, obviously depending on when she gets out there, and obviously things will change when we get to work with her a little bit, but she's coming in with this like really interesting and really, really effective hybrid serve. She does this because she's so tall. She tosses it and hits it like a float serve, but she just swings through it a little more. So it comes off spinning a little bit, and then sometimes it just doesn't spin, which is like makes it a really hard float serve. But it's a serve that she can take advantage of her length and height. So that's one thing I've noticed on video, but like a lot of other things that we'll try to work on. But she's coming in as an attacker that she's just long, really big, really good blocker, and she's really good at like maneuvering the ball around the court, which is really important, obviously.
Awesome.
Another change I've noticed just from this spring is in the past, you've had maybe the entire freshman class be able to show up early in January and go through the entire spring practice. And this year, you've got 3 newcomers who have just arrived. So Virginia Adriano is one of those, Kenna Kogel, who we've mentioned, and Manayo Beje.
Ali Check, she's here too now.
And Ali Check. Excuse me. So a fourth one. Does that throw your timing off a little bit, or do you have to come up with a different plan this summer than you might have come up with the years past when everyone's been around for the spring?
Yeah, I know. Like integrating new people, especially 4 of them. When you think about it, that's a lot. That's more than normal. Like last year we had Taylor Landfair. She came a little later. But in the past, I mean, it's been like everyone that's going to be on our team in the fall has been here. Whether I think it was 2 years ago when we had Merritt Beeson transfer in, and then we had all, Harper and Bergen and Lane, they all came early. So like that whole team was together, and then we went to Brazil, right? And then kind of that whole core was back. And then last year we added Layla Blackwell and Taylor Landfair, right? So, and then this year we're adding 4. If I'm being honest, that's probably one of my, I don't think concern is the right word, but it's just like the fact that we don't get to work with them all the time, and I'm gone all the time, and we're out recruiting, and it's not like we're in the gym. For people that don't know, it's not, college volleyball teams aren't in the gym with coaching staffs training all summer. So that's one thing that I'm very interested to see and intrigued of, like, how do those new 4 athletes on top of, we had a few younger ones that were in the gym this past spring. How does that all look once we're able to start, August 1st? So, I would say, Jeff, if I'm being upfront, like that's one thing that in the back of my mind, it's like, man, are they going to be ready? Are they going to be ready? Are they going to be ready? So much so, are we going to be ready to help them? Versus typically a lot of people have either transferred in or come in enrolled early in January. And, we've had a beach season to really get to know them, and then we have 6 weeks of indoor. And then, 2 years ago, we had a foreign trip that we got way more in the gym opportunities. So we felt like, man, we're really going to get to know people. I mean, day one is going to be day one for me in the gym with those 4, and that's going to be something I'm looking forward to, but it's going to be interesting for sure. And I bet to a degree for them too, that it's a little bit of, how is it going to go? My first time in Coach Dani Busboom's practice, and being coached by Jaylen, Kelly, and Brennan, and obviously all my teammates, and then obviously, being at the Devaney Center and playing for Nebraska, like it, so there's definitely a little unknown there for sure, but something that we're looking forward to when the day comes.
Yeah. The other change I think you kind of mentioned too is the assistant coaching positions have changed a little bit too, where I mean, it sounded like from when Dani talked about this, that you're all kind of pitching in and helping out. It's not like you're only coaching the outside hitters, but you're their kind of primary point of contact too. Has that been an adjustment to kind of get used to that? Are you running different drills in practice, or is it kind of a collaborative effort?
Collab for sure. And just I think to your point, Lincoln, for those that might know volleyball, typically it's not a, I guess I've never been on a football staff, so I don't want to pretend like I know football, but I doubt the quarterback's coach is spending much time over there coaching the outside linebackers.
Mm-hmm.
It's just because, I would, so it's, volleyball is way more collaborative because, like, for example, I'm running our defense. Everyone on our team is going to play some sort of defense, whether you're blocking or you're playing back row defense or, so there, you get coached by everybody. I think the fact that there's been some overlap with, I've coached the middles the last however long now, and I've worked with passers. The last couple of years I've done liberos and middles, which is funny because they're like the two opposite positions, but then, I help with the passers. So I feel like I've worked with Harper and I've worked with T. I've worked with T before. I've worked with Taylor. So I think a lot of it is just the adjustment. And I think it's really good for us coaches too, to like not get pigeonholed into doing. So I'll use Kelly Hunter for an example. Kelly was a setter here, great setter here, national championship, All-American setter here at Nebraska. When she's got here, her primary role, even when she was a GA, was help with setting. And then she was a volunteer coach, helping John with setting. The past couple of years as a full-time assistant, setting, offense, and not like she didn't coach other positions, but her job was like setting, and sometimes you can get pigeonholed into doing what you only know versus how we bring value is, and I think this is part of Dani's magic too, is like delegating the recruiting. Like we all learn different things. So that way it's not just, hey, we have to rely on this one person to do this, So it's been great. Yeah. I'm working with Penn. So this past spring, especially once we started indoor in March, I had 4 outsides and an opposite. And Skylar Pierce kind of trained at both. And then now we're going to have, we added two opposites. So we're going to have a few more pin hitters than we did this spring. And Kelly's working with the liberos, but she's still helping Dani with the setters a lot. So it's not like, oh, we never talk to them anymore. And then Coach Brendan Hagers, he was a grad assistant with us these last few years. And he was typically like always with me with the middles. So a lot of it is just like, he's like well-versed work, like kind of being around Becca and Andy. And, I thought he did a great job, in March, April, May, kind of helping, Becca and Andy develop. And I think he'll do the same with, the 2 freshman middles we have coming in. So, I think that was another, I think we talked about transition. That was another transition piece for, I think I can speak for us 3 assistant coaches. I think is Kelly's coaching a different position. I'm coaching a different position. Obviously Brendan's, no matter what Brendan we coaching, he'd be coaching a different position. But I think it's been really, really good. But at the same time, Dani notices something with an outside. It's, she's the boss, obviously. She can say whatever she wants. But Brendan noticed something with an outside, or I noticed something with the middle. It's not like we're afraid to step on each other's toes there a little bit. I think for the players in the beginning, it was a little different. You had in the past, like Harper Murray. Harper Murray, since she's been here, she's been coached by John and Jordan Larson, 2 people that aren't here anymore, the fact that, in certain drills, Dani's working with the setters and Kelly's all the way on the other side of the gym with, the 4 gifted liberos we have in the gym, So I think that during the practice flow is a lot different. But, to a degree, once we start playing 6-on-6, you can kind of go back home a little bit, Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, and I think it's a positive. I think it's great. I would love to like, hey, next year Dani shuffles it again in the spring, just so we can all learn and get better and we can coach other things. And I think that makes everybody better. And I think it's also great for the girls. I thought this was also like a really good thing why we did beach was it, it's great for the girls to not hear from the same person for 12, 9 months out of the year. I thought that was one of the genius of John Cook was when he did the beach thing, when he was having Tyler coach in, he was having Chris Thomas coach in, Dan Meskey and Dani and Caleb Banworth and me and Kelly and me, and Brennan and me and Kelly, where the number one person they hear from isn't him for 9 months. So his voice doesn't, I thought that was one of I don't think that's why he decided to have it in the first place, but I think that was like a very big positive of it, if that makes sense. So, and I think just us switching positions, especially for the older ones, I've worked, like, for an example, Beck Alec, worked with her for 3 years now. I think it's awesome actually for her to learn from somebody else. And it's not like, oh, her and I don't talk. I'm still I'm not 5 steps away anymore. I'm 15, but I think it's great for her to learn from somebody else that knows what he's doing too. So.
We're wrapping up here with Jaylen Reyes. Jaylen, thanks again for being with us. You've mentioned a couple times during this conversation, like the June 15th calls. And for people who don't understand what the significance of that date is, that is really when the recruiting cycle can start for, I think, 2 years out. So players going into their junior year of high school. So this past June 15th, a couple weeks ago, was the first day of the recruiting period for the class of 2027. Just give us a little insight into process, like how much prep goes into the planning for that day, like putting names on a board, how far out does that happen? And then ultimately, how do you all come together and decide who are going to get those first calls and offers?
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak for how we do it here. I know a lot of other programs are probably the same way, but I mean, the prep starts years out. And I know it's just being honest, like if people that think, oh, it starts on that day, like it does not. Like, let's just be honest about that. It doesn't. And that doesn't mean you contact this person, but people come to camps before the date. And sometimes people come to camps years before the date, And sure, recruiting conversations can't or don't happen, but hey, they come to school A's gym, and then later that summer they go to school C's gym and school D and school F and school Z, and they're comparing different, they're comparing different schools, and obviously they're seeing how your seasons are going and stuff like that. And then, on top of that, we're also making trips to go and see kids, So I know sometimes some kids will start getting looked at when they're 13, 14 years old, depending on how elite they are, and how much attention they garner. And then, I would say before the June 15th date, when the recruiting window opens, I believe that Memorial Day, or no, the last weekend in May, all of us are all over the country trying to, we're in certain club teams' gyms doing camps, we're looking at practices, or we're going to watch tournaments all over the place, and we're spending a day here, and the next day we're across the country watching somebody else, and the next day we're back in the Midwest watching somebody else. So, there's a lot of prep. I'm going to speak for me. There's a lot of prep that we try to put into this, getting ready for this day. And even though, hey, this past early June, we're flying around watching kids for this day, we also have the class of 28, 29, 2030 in mind for that, So we're trying to work, try to be as efficient, get the biggest bang for our buck, if that makes sense. So it's not like, I'm only have blinders on up to 2027 when we've been recruiting this spring. That's a heavy focus. But, for us, it was like, can we maybe, hey, well, everyone's chasing 27s this summer. Can we spend time in the 8s and 9s and 30s so that way, we can kind of have an idea of who we like to see, and stuff like that. And I know a lot of coaches, and me included, we do USA stuff since they're younger, so we get to see them. Obviously, we're not coaching them as, I'm not a Nebraska coach there, or this person's not a school A coach or school B coach, but, we're all there and we're working with kids, we're USA, but like, I'll be honest, like, you're working with these great athletes, and you get to see people, and you get to see and you get to see how they react to stuff, and see, how they, even physically grow, right? It's just not just, physically grow. You get to work with them. You get to kind of meet them a little bit, in a training setting for a couple of hours, 2 sessions, 3 sessions a day. So, there's a lot of prep that goes into it. And then, everyone's, you're talking to club coaches or high school coaches throughout the time. And, I think the thing we're allowed to do is express interest in certain kids, and, trying to dial in, okay, what positions do we need? What are we looking for in this specific class? Okay, hey, there's some good players in this class in this position, but there's a couple of better players, in our opinion, in the next class in that same position. Can we afford to skip and go to that year? And that's obviously I can't get into the details of this now, but that was the decision we made, right? Is that we're going to skip in a specific spot to kind of wait for another spot, So I don't know. I think there's a lot of prep. I think there's a lot of coaches. I think a lot of schools do a lot of work And I think a lot of schools are really, really good at it. I think a lot of schools come up with some really creative ideas to where even I'm like, wow, that's a great idea. Whether it's something they email out to club coaches or what they do at certain camps or how they even try to finagle, hey, we have an app on our phone and how they organize their app and how do they organize their names on whiteboard. We're the classic, hey, we have names on a whiteboard and their classes are split up by positions. And we have like pie charts at the bottom. And when they're committed or us, like we can see, okay, in class on the 2029 team of Nebraska volleyball, this is who's going to be on the team. What positions do we need? And stuff like that. So for us, we try to be super visual. So it's like anything visual, we all come to my office and we just talk about it. And we're writing names, we're taking names off the board, we're adding them, we're maybe, hey, we're putting this, not like the tags are never really in order, I don't think, but sometimes we move them because it's like, well, hey, this is priority 1, priority 2, and stuff like that. And I think it's a never-ending conversation. It's a conversation that should never end, and you need somebody to be working on it 365 days a year and not just for, okay, hey, January of 2026, Jaylen, you can start on the 2028 class. In my opinion, I would be way behind. And I know some people are like, oh no, the process starts June 15th. I'm like, okay, like that sounds great if I'm being honest, but great,
Yeah. Well, it never stops too. Nebraska has their dream team camp later in July. You probably missed 3 or 4 text messages from other coaches or watch some video tonight. So it never stops. So we appreciate you coming on tonight, Jaylen, and sharing your thoughts and catching up. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We appreciate it. Thanks again to Nebraska assistant Jaylen Reyes on Volleyball State. Jaylen was joining us on the road. It feels like Jaylen hasn't really been home this summer from a variety of either vacations or camps, or I think he was down in Texas talking to us from one of the junior national team tournaments that are going on down there. So I don't know when Jaylen sleeps exactly. He's always keeping an eye out for potential future Huskers and even some folks who have already committed to join Nebraska over the next couple of years. So thanks again to Jaylen for joining us from the road.
Yeah, the grind never stops. So speaking of one of the things, I think Jaylen was up there to watch this too, but you're just recruiting, observing, watching them. Team USA, let's go with Team USA stuff. We'll talk about the older women first. Volleyball Nations League wrapped up, I think, since we last talked. United States had a great bounce back.
The second week has wrapped up, not the entire event.
The second week wrapped up. I think we were talking right as I was about to start. The United States had a great bounce back week in, I believe they're in Czechia. Also, it's fun to watch. Emily Eman is calling all these matches for Volleyball Nations League. Watching Emily go to Brazil and to Czechia, I think she's following the team. She's living a great life. I look forward
and then she goes to exotic Arlington, Texas for the next week of Volleyball Nations League play. Yeah, US I think went 1-3 in their first week and then bounced back to go 3-1 in week 2. So they're sitting at 4-4 in the competition. That puts them in 8th place. So basically right in the middle of the pack. We talked about this with Eric Sullivan going into the Volleyball Nations League. The US focus right now seems to be playing lots of players. They are not just picking one team of 12 and rolling with it through the entire multi-week competition. A lot of new faces showed up in week 2. The U.S. has been rotating setters. They started with Sage Kahaina-Torres, the Texas setter. Ella Mae Powell got some action in this week. Also Rachel Fairbanks, the recently graduated star from Pittsburgh, who's playing in the PVF now, got some turn at setting. And so Jordan Poulter, Jenna Gray, not in this, who probably figures into the Team USA bands in 2028 in LA, hasn't been playing. And then the name I saw, congratulations to her, just signed a contract with one of the Italian clubs, Cami Miner from Stanford, not playing on this as well. So a lot of new faces in the first year of the Olympic quad are getting some run for Team USA, and they bounced back. And a player who I think is really staking her claim to being challenging for a spot in the Olympics in LA and then the World Championships later this fall. Our old friend Sarah Franklin from Wisconsin, former National Player of the Year, really showed what she can do over the last couple of weeks. She's been the US's leading scorer over the first 2 weeks of the Volleyball Nations League. And so it's really cool to see her, to be able to like cheer for Sarah Franklin. And if you're a Nebraska fan, not be terrified when she's been on the court, which is always a great thing about following the Americans. And then, you have stars who have popped up lately as well, like Maddie Skinner, the former Texas and Kentucky star. So the U.S., by design, I think, is cycling through a number of players. And then, of course, particular to Nebraska fans' interest, Lexi Rodriguez made her first international appearance this past week.
Yeah, and I thought she played very well. When she played libero, she led the match in digs, looked pretty good in serve receive too. I think you mentioned Sarah Franklin. There's a lot of social media content out there when Lexi and Sarah Franklin were playing Pepper. You had these two enemies from Wisconsin, Nebraska, and they're teammates now, and they're getting along. So I think the rivalry sometimes may be more between the fans and the college ranks than it is amongst the players. But Lexi made the most of her first opportunity. We'll see if she gets invited back. Morgan Hentz has been the other libero as well. I mean, other world class. So, but Lexi's proved that she can hang on the international stage, and I thought she did quite well.
Yeah, and one of the other players that stuck out to me, kind of a new face in the Team USA rotation in the middle, Amber Ajide.
Oh, yeah.
I'm hoping I'm pronouncing her name right, but she was a star at Hawaii, and then she saw her play for Love Houston in League One volleyball this past spring. She really opened my eyes to how good that she can be. So I think the U.S. has some good options in the middle, and even some of the veterans weren't playing these last couple of weeks, like Chiako Bagu and Haley Washington, who have worn the Team USA jersey before, and might be factoring in 2028. But we're 3 years out from that. This is a great time to get some of those newcomers involved and see who wants to challenge for one of the 12 Olympic spots in 2028.
Fun fact: Amber Adije was actually a draft pick by the Omaha Supernova. She opted not to play for Omaha, obviously, because she played with Love. But the first year out, she was drafted she could have been a Supernova.
Mm-hmm. Well, so the U.S. was off this past week. They're going to be playing the week of July 9th through the 13th. They actually come back home to play in Arlington, Texas, in the third week of Volleyball Nations League. So the women are going to play Thailand, the Dominican Republic, Canada, and China. And I would imagine they're going to be favored in 3 of those matches. And anytime the U.S. plays China, that's always must-watch volleyball as well. So home court advantage for the U.S. in Arlington, Texas, July 9th through the 13th. Probably need to go 3-1 to cement their place in the Volleyball Nation League finals.
Yeah, the goal is make that top 8. So hopefully we'll see what they can do next weekend on home turf. And you've seen kind of the local team always do a little bit better. Hopefully they get crowds to kind of boost them and boost the energy in the gym. So speaking of another international tournament, let's go up north to our friends in Canada.
That's right. The kids had a great week.
Oh, yeah. So it was the under-19 NORCECA Pan Am Cup. Even though this was labeled U19, this was like a U16 team for the United States too. They really, because there's a number of different competitions going on. There's the U19 World Championships. There's a U21 World Championships. And so this one is kind of, you go to World Championship versus a Pan Am Cup. It's the third tier. So they kind of went younger and
very young.
Like kids they're kids. They're kids going into their freshman and sophomore years in high school, and they won the whole dang thing. Spoiler alert, they won. Yeah.
Well, not a spoiler anymore. It happened. The final was on Saturday. The U.S. beat Mexico and swept Mexico in the gold medal match. Of Nebraska interest, we will say there were a couple of Nebraska's 2027 commits that we talked about on our most recent show that didn't make the 12-player roster. That's Shea Witherspoon and Hua Laikona were alternates on that team. I would, don't judge a book by its cover on that. What we know about this competition is it's running at the same time as some of those big junior like club competitions. So like the club national championships, junior Olympics. I think that's what Jaylen was actually at down in Dallas. A number of players who are in the what am I trying to say here? Like in the talent pool for those teams will opt out and say, hey, I'm going to go, these are the biggest club matches I'm having all year. My team needs me, and I'm going to go play for them. I don't know if that was exactly the case with Witherspoon and Lycona. That's just in general what can happen. But the U.S. roster that they sent, like Lincoln said, very young, 15 and 16-year-olds, classes of 2027 and 2028, except for the MVP of the tournament, a player I want all of our listeners to keep an eye on because her name is going to come up in recruiting circles in a couple of years. The MVP of the tournament was 14 years old, has not even played a high school match yet, but outside hitter Kari Knotts from Marietta, Georgia. There is going to be a bloodbath of a recruiting battle for her in 2 years when she's able to be offered a college scholarship. She's kind of blown up on TikTok for being just some of the footage of her in club tournaments and, workouts. She's a crazy good athlete. Yeah. She was hitting over the top of players at this Pan Am Cup, and in the gold medal match against Mexico on Saturday, Kari Knotts had 19 kills, 3 aces, and 2 blocks. She was named the MVP of the tournament, and I believe was the youngest player on the U.S. roster.
Oh yeah, she was. She's 6'3" outside hitter, just like you said, athletic freak. And I watched a little bit of that championship match too, and it's hard to take your eyes off of her too. The other person I think would highlight. There's a number of people whose names will probably come up, but for the volleyball state audience, Shayla Rottenberg, who is going into her sophomore year. She'll be at Milford. If you watched high school state basketball or volleyball, you saw her perform. She great basketball player as well too. Also, daughter of Lisa Rietsma, who was all-American player for Nebraska in the mid-90s. So fun to watch too. I thought she was one of the better middle blockers that I saw. They do their awards weird where it's only the best middle blockers just by blocks. Or best blocker.
It's like the statistical leader.
It's a statistical leader. So the USA only played whatever 15 sets because they swept everyone. So stat awards hurt sometimes.
Yeah, they I think the US team, if they played, we'll see 1, 2, 3 prelim matches and then 2 in like the elimination round, might have lost like 4 sets total in this whole competition. I know they dropped a set in the prelim rounds, but like the US was by far and away the dominant team in this tournament, and they usually are in NORCECA competitions. But Shayla Rottenberg had a wonderful week up in Canada where the Pan Am Cup was, and we're going to keep an eye on her over the next couple of years just down the road in Milford, Nebraska. A couple of other players on Penn State actually had, I think, 3 of their commits, the class of 2027, on this roster as well, and a player who everyone kind of in college recruiting circles is keeping an eye on to see what decision she's going to make. One of the other top outside hitters on this U.S. team is Ireland Real, who is a player in Southern California that, the chatter is she's kind of down to between Stanford and Texas. A lot of the other top commits or top players in the class of 2027 have committed very quickly in the middle of June. Ireland Real has not committed yet. And a lot of times that means, waiting on seeing if you can get admitted into Stanford. But, if not that, Texas is right there as well. So some really, really talented players who are going to have a couple more years in high school before, you're going to learn their names at the college level in a few years. Yeah,
the other one that I like, Marissa Jones, I've seen her at the Dream Team camp, very athletic setter. She's also from Georgia too. She's one of another top 10 recruit of the class of 2027 who has not committed anywhere too. So maybe we'll see where they end up here in the next couple of weeks. So, that's it for that tournament. We got a couple Nebraska news, odds and ends. They were announced. I don't know. It's announcing a press conference. How exciting that is! But it shows the inside maybe of team dynamics a little bit. But Harper Murray and Rebecca Alec will be representing Nebraska at the annual Big Ten Media Days here at the end of July. What that means, I don't know. Will they be captains? I think it's not surprising regardless, because I think they're 2 very well-spoken, articulate people and great representations of the program. So do you think there's much to read into that decision, Jeff?
Potentially. And it makes for good social content. You see this in the other sports too, of when schools choose their representatives to go to Big Ten Media Days. So, a lot of times that can be an inkling as to who's going to be a captain. I think we've talked a little bit before in one of our off-season shows that it wouldn't surprise either of us if Rebecca Alec was a captain, you know, a local kid who's very passionate about the program, who seems to be respected by everyone on that team, and is going to be an upperclassman on a team that has a lot of younger and transfer players on it. So wouldn't shock me at all if Rebecca Alec ended up being a captain. Don't know if she's going to be the only one. You know, we've talked about Harper Murray, we've talked about Bergen Riley,
and Andy Jackson's the other one.
Andy Jackson in there as well. You know, at the end of the day, it's not the biggest thing I think about on this team of who's going to be their captains. But, you know, you heard Jaylen say it during our chat with him. One of the things that they really have to focus on is they have 6 new players on this team and a couple new coaches on the staff. So all these people online who are talking about, well, Nebraska is clearly the favorite to go to the Final Four and win the national title. Like, that's putting the cart before the horse a little bit when you've got, sure, a lot of talent in that room, but some dynamics that you have to figure out, and the chemistry stuff has to work because there's a lot of mouths to feed on that roster and just one volleyball.
Yeah. There's a lot. I mean, again, I think regardless of whether they have the official title of captain, they'll play an important leadership role in this team and kind of help with the team dynamics. And like you said, integrate all of the newcomers and the challenges that await too. So speaking of those challenges, just over a month away. The red-white scrimmage is going to be August 9th. You mentioned that
that's the earliest I've ever experienced or heard of for that.
Yeah, because usually, I mean, Nebraska, when they moved up the schedule because the AVCA first serve, and then it usually be a week before. But this year, they're bringing back the alumni match. So I don't know, bring back. They're having an alumni match, which I think is exciting. And then they're going to
bring it back for the first time in a long, long time, I would say. I don't even remember them. Maybe they played alumni matches in the 90s. They've had recent alumni, like recent former players, come in and fill in the red-white scrimmage just to make in years where maybe the roster hasn't been as big. So. And I know Katie Rolson had played in the red-white scrimmage before, after she graduated as well. You know, with the expansion of the rosters up to as many as 18 players, you probably have to do that less. So I think this is, you know, for a number of reasons, just going to be really cool. Fans will love to see former players come back. We don't know who that is yet. I don't think those have been released. And you have to imagine they're going to be players who have probably completed their Husker careers sometime in the last 4 or 5 years at most. I don't imagine you're going to, you know, have Lindsay Light come back and play in this match.
Lisa Barrow's not coming out of that time.
Yeah, exactly. Like Sarah Pav is not walking through that door. Although if one person could do it, it would be her. I think, you know, she's got some other bigger things going on in her life right now that are more important than playing an exhibition volleyball match. But I think it's going to be fascinating. You know, is this something like Maddie Kubik Banks comes in and plays? You've got Lindsay Krause, who is just started her professional career, who could come back and play. That team needs a setter, and Nebraska has one on their assistant coaching roster. Yeah. So, you know, who's going to set that team? That'll be interesting to see. But I think this is going to be a lot of fun. And that's on August 16th. So it goes red-white scrimmage 1 week. Next week, alumni match. Next week, ABCA first serve.
Yeah. And heck, the Nebraska got 2 setters on their bench too. I'm excited. That's probably what I'm looking forward to the most over the next month, is figuring out who's going to be on that roster and writing about it. So there's a lot more coming. Again, that kind of wraps up today's episode, but we got a lot more coming. We got volleyball 101, maybe a little 201. We may get some advanced technical.
We'll get some advanced stuff in there. Our listeners know what's up.
Yeah, for sure. That'll be a Patreon episode only. So if you want to get that, subscribe to Patreon at patreon.com/I80 Club.
That's right. Just $5 a month. We're going to give you bonus pods. We're going to make you a part of Volleyball Late, which I've had a lot of fun doing in the spring. And I know we're going to have a lot of fun doing it in the fall after select matches, as long as both of our internets work all right. So you can only get live access to Volleyball Late if you are an I80 Club subscriber. We're going to revive the newsletter, get that going out. And hey, again, we want to thank our friends at Alumni Hall for being supporters of the show this week. You can get all your great Husker apparel and merchandise there. Shop downtown at 12th and P, or down at South Point Pavilions, and just mention Volleyball State to save 15%, or shop online at alumnihall.com and use promo code Volleyball State, all one word, to save 15%.
Yeah, we got a lot more great stuff coming too. We've already actually taped an interview with a Division I coach. It was a fascinating interview.
He was awesome.
drop that in later July. We'll go through all of the conference previews. There's more content coming your way. You can stay up to date with what's coming down our content chambers. Volleyball Pod on Twitter, Blue Sky. Email us at volleyballstate@gmail.com. Jeff, how do they find you on Twitter?
You can find me on Twitter at @ByJeffSheldon.
And I am Lincoln_VB. So thanks for hanging in. Thanks for listening. And thank you for living in the Volleyball State.